Ever wonder who's really behind the scenes, shaping the policies that shape our schools?
Ooh, pulling back the curtain. I like it.
Right. Well, get ready to deep dive into the world of education policy officers.
Okay, sign me up.
We're using RoleCatcher's awesome career resources for this one, by the way, to really break down what these folks actually do and how you can become one.
Because, let's be honest, education policy might not sound like the most, shall we say, thrilling field at first glance.
Definitely not as flashy as, say, being a social media influencer.
Huh, true that.
Yeah.
But trust me, it touches every single one of our lives way more than people realize. And lucky for us, we have an expert in navigating these career waters right here with us.
Well, I wouldn't call myself an expert, but I do love digging into this stuff.
That's what we like to hear. So what's the first thing that jumps out at you from RoleCatcher's guide? Anything surprise you about what education policy officers actually do all day?
Okay, first of all, can we just acknowledge that the term policy officer sounds a little formal?
A tad. Like they should be wearing a uniform or something.
Right. But then you read about what they're actually doing, and it's like, whoa, these people are researchers, analysts, strategists.
The architects of our education system. Except instead of blueprints, they're using data, research, and a whole lot of brain power.
Exactly. They're not just stuck behind desks pushing paper. They're the ones researching, analyzing, and literally creating the policies that build our education system.
They're shaping young minds. Think about it. Remember how your school district always seemed to be strapped for cash? Or that time they decided to revamp the entire math curriculum and everyone freaked out.
Oh, yeah. Those decisions and so many more all stem from this world, from the work that education policy officers are doing behind the scenes.
Behind the scenes, but definitely not in a vacuum. I mean, the guide mentions they work in all sorts of places. We're talking government offices, think tanks, schools, nonprofits.
Some are even working remotely, right? The guide mentioned that.
Absolutely. Some are traveling to meet with different stakeholders. Some are collaborating with tech companies, designing educational software. It's a surprisingly dynamic field when you think about it.
Okay, now that's what I call making a difference. But the guide also keeps it real about the not so glamorous side, right? Like, hello, bureaucracy. How does someone who's clearly passionate about education not get totally lost in a sea of red tape?
Right, because passion alone can only take you so far. And it's true, the bureaucratic hurdles are real. That's where things get, well, strategic.
Oh, I like where this is going. Give me the inside scoop.
So remember how the guide mentioned specialization, focusing on a specific area within education policy, like early childhood education or higher ed reform.
Okay, so instead of trying to change the entire ocean, you find your own current and make waves there.
Precisely. That way you can have more influence, more agility, and maybe slightly less red tape. It's not a guaranteed shortcut, but it can definitely help.
Makes sense. But what if you're someone who's passionate about education as a whole? Do you have to specialize right away?
Not necessarily. You could also focus on building your network, connect with policymakers, attend conferences, become a voice in the field.
Networking, the original life hack.
It's true. The more connections you have, the more you understand the nuances of the system, the better equipped you'll be to navigate those bureaucratic hurdles and have a more direct impact.
So it's not just about being a policy wonk, it's about building relationships, understanding different perspectives.
Exactly. And speaking of understanding different perspectives, one thing that really struck me in the guide was the emphasis on people skills.
Yeah. Persuasion, social perceptiveness, emotional intelligence. I was like, wait a minute, this is like being an education diplomat.
It totally is, because you can have the most well-researched, data-driven policy in the world. But if you can't communicate its value, build consensus, bring people along with you.
It's dead in the water.
Exactly. You've got to speak their language, build trust, make them see how this benefits everyone.
Okay, now I'm really starting to understand the human side of this field. It's not just about policies, it's about people.
100%.
It's like you need a whole other degree just to decipher what an education policy officer actually needs to know.
Right. It's not just about being passionate about education. You need some serious expertise to back it up. So what does that look like in practice? What should someone who's interested in this field actually be studying?
Yeah, because I'm looking at this core knowledge section in the RoleCatcher guide, and it's a pretty intimidating list.
It's a fascinating mix, that's for sure. Of course, understanding educational research methods is key, along with data analysis, because, data is king these days.
Data everywhere.
But it goes way beyond that. We're talking program evaluation, education law, understanding different learning theories.
So, like, you need to be part data scientist, part lawyer, part education enthusiast.
Exactly. Which is actually why the guide highlights a surprisingly diverse range of academic backgrounds that can lead to success in this field,
Yeah.
because you need that well-rounded perspective.
Okay, so walk me through this, because when I think education policy, I immediately think, well, you need an education degree.
Sure, that's a natural fit. But we're also talking public policy, economics, sociology,
Hmm.
even psychology and law.
Okay, now that's what I call interdisciplinary. I never would have thought about how, say, psychology connects to education policy.
It makes perfect sense when you think about it. Someone with a background in psychology might have valuable insights into how students learn best, or the impact of different teaching methodologies on student outcomes.
Or how to design a curriculum that actually engages students instead of just, putting them to sleep.
Exactly. It's like each area of expertise brings this unique piece to the puzzle, right? It helps create a more complete and nuanced understanding of how to create educational policies that actually work.
It's not just about the numbers on a spreadsheet, it's about understanding the human impact of those numbers.
Precisely. And that human impact includes the educators themselves. Remember, education policy officers, they don't just work in a vacuum. The guide really emphasizes the importance of collaboration with teachers, with administrators, the people actually on the ground in schools.
Because what good is a policy if it looks great on paper but completely falls apart in a real classroom?
Exactly. Those on the front lines, teachers, principals, they have invaluable insights into the day-to-day realities of implementing these policies. So education policy officers need to be able to listen to that feedback, understand those challenges.
And then find ways to bridge the gap, right, between research-based best practices and, what's actually doable in a real school with real constraints.
It's about striking that balance, making sure that policies are not just well-intentioned, but also actually implementable in the real world.
So if you're someone who loves research but hates the idea of being stuck in an ivory tower, this might be the perfect field for you.
Right. You could be analyzing data one day, drafting policy recommendations the next, and then presenting your findings to a room full of, skeptical school board members the day after that.
Sounds like you need to be adaptable, a strategic thinker, a skilled communicator.
And a little bit of a superhero, honestly, because let's be real, education policy can be a complex and sometimes, well, let's just say it, challenging field to navigate. You're dealing with competing priorities, limited resources.
And a constantly changing landscape. What works today might be outdated tomorrow.
Exactly. So you've got to be resilient. You've got to be able to handle those inevitable setbacks, learn from your mistakes, and keep pushing forward.
You need that unwavering belief in the power of education to make a difference.
Because at the end of the day, that's what this is all about, right? It's about ensuring that every single child, regardless of their background, has access to a quality education.
Now that's a mission worth fighting for. And speaking of rewards, let's talk about the fact that the guide reminds us this isn't just personally fulfilling. It can also be a pretty darn practical career path.
Job security, anyone.
Right. Education isn't going anywhere. And with all the change happening in our world right now, the need for skilled professionals who really understand the policy side of things.
That need is only going to grow. And with that growth comes the potential for, career advancement, leadership roles.
You could be the one shaping the future of education, right? Crafting the policies that impact generations to come.
And let's not forget about those intrinsic rewards. The guide talks about the opportunity to make a real difference in the lives of students and educators. That sense of purpose is huge.
That's a reward that's pretty hard to put a price tag on. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. The impact, the skills, the challenges, the rewards.
Don't forget the psychology.
Oh, yeah, and don't forget to brush up on your psychology. But now it's time to tackle those make-or-break interview questions.
The ones that would make even a seasoned policy pro sweat a little. Are you ready for this?
Bring it on. Let's do this.
Welcome back to The Deep Dive, where we're on a mission to demystify the world of education policy officers.
We've covered a lot of ground already, that's for sure. The ins and outs of the job, the skills you need, the challenges you'll face.
And now we're about to enter the arena where dreams are made or broken. The interview.
Time for the final exam.
And just like any good final exam, RoleCatcher's guide has provided us with some seriously tough questions. These are not your grandma's interview questions, folks.
They're designed to really see what you're made of.
Okay, so you teased this one earlier. Remember that question about navigating a complex political landscape to implement an education policy? I need to hear more about this.
Right, because that's the reality of this work, isn't it? It's not enough to have a brilliant idea.
You've got to be able to sell it, to get people on board. which can be tricky when you're talking about something as, well, let's just say passionate as education. People have strong opinions, and rightfully so, right? We all have a stake in education.
Absolutely. So let's say you're in that interview hot seat and they hit you with this question. You've got your research, you've got your data, you've got your policy recommendation, but you also know there's pushback from certain stakeholders.
Uh-oh. Where do you even begin to unpack that in an interview?
Right. Because you can't just say, well, the data speaks for itself.
Although the day is a good place to start, of course. But you need to show that you understand the bigger picture, that you can see different perspectives even if you don't necessarily agree with them.
You have to be a diplomat.
Exactly. So did you try to find some common ground, even with those stakeholders who were resistant? Did you adjust your approach based on their feedback? Did you find a creative solution that addressed everyone's needs?
And did you do all of that while still advocating for what you believe in? What's best for students?
Exactly. Because you can't just back down at the first sign of resistance, right?
Yeah.
You have to be able to stand your ground, but do it in a way that's respectful, collaborative, and ultimately effective.
Okay, that's one tough question down. But the guide has more. What else did they throw our way?
Oh, here's a good one. How do you measure the success of education policies?
Ooh, that is a good one. Because we all want to know, right? Is it working? Are our kids actually learning?
But it's not always easy to quantify, is it? I mean, we could talk about standardized test scores all day.
And let's be honest, those only tell part of the story.
Right. So this is where you really showcase your understanding of the bigger picture. It's about looking at things like graduation rates, student engagement, even long-term outcomes.
Like, are those students going on to college? Are they finding meaningful work? Are they becoming engaged citizens who contribute to society?
Exactly. It's about understanding that education is an investment in the future, and that its true impact might not be fully realized for years, even decades down the line.
Wow, okay. So to sum it all up, for those of you out there who are ready to take the plunge into the world of education policy,
Buckle up.
seriously, be prepared to think on your feet, be passionate, be persuasive, and most importantly, never lose sight of the fact that this work is about something so much bigger than just, policies and procedures.
It's about people. It's about creating a better future for our kids.
Couldn't have said it better myself. A huge thank you to our expert for guiding us through this incredible deep dive into the world of education policy officers.
The pleasure was all mine, truly.
And to our amazing listeners, thank you for joining us. We hope this episode has inspired you to think differently about education, about the impact you want to have on the world, and maybe even, just maybe, to consider a career in this incredibly important and rewarding field. Until next time on The Deep Dive.